So, in the late Middle Ages, producing a written work often involved synthesizing various authorities and sources. However, it was not a solitary task, as many works resulted from long-standing exchanges of ideas within networks or groups of acquaintances and friends. Although the publication process was distinct from present-day practices, sharing an initial version of one's work with a companion or a disciple represented one of the primary stages of publication before creating a presentation copy intended for a patron or another recipient. Formal or informal exchanges existed in different disciplines, and astronomy and astrology were not exceptions to this rule. As the following discussion will show, the lack of strict regulation of the study of the science of the stars. So science of the stars include, during the Middle Ages, astronomy and its practical aspect, astrology. So the study of the science of the stars in the early medieval university, especially in Paris and Oxford, probably encouraged the rapid exchange of ideas between different groups of scholars. Examining the practices of the science of the stars through the lens of communities of learning, as recently explored and enhanced by constant muse, allows for a better understanding of the genesis of a wide range of works and provides insight into the circulation of ideas. As Muse and John Crossley have rightly underlined, the transmission of ideas always depends on the existence of networks of communication and often also of the physical transport of books and manuscripts. Informal networks of friends could often constitute just as powerful a community of learning as some formal institutions, whether in the 12th century or the 15th century, and we'll see that we will focus on the 14th century. So the different aspects of this definition may be applied to different groups of scholars found in the universities of Paris and Oxford in the 14th century. The study of both groups is made possible by the abundance of surviving manuscripts, often autographs that circulated in this context. So here you have in front of you two autograph copies, one produced in Oxford by Simon Bridon and another one by Jean Desmures, produced in Paris. You will soon become more familiar with them. So the sources often show that those scholars gathered around comparable astronomical texts and tables. This was facilitated by the shared access to sources through colleges, but also through friends. The spread of new texts and practices was thus facilitated by the formation of networks of scholars with similar interests. Although the existence of those groups are attested for an earlier period, for this paper, I will focus on the 14th century and the university context. First, I will examine the official statutes of the science of the stars in the universities of Paris and Oxford. Then I will outline the formation of this group of scholars. They came together around various texts and sources of authority. Finally, I will discuss the dissemination of scientific ideas and texts produced in these networks, as well as the specializations of certain scholars. So the practice of the science of the stars in the universities of Paris and Oxford is characterized on various levels. Astronomy was formally taught in the Faculty of Arts, along with other mathematical sciences. So those mathematical sciences were called quadrivium, and natural philosophy. So in quadrivium, we have arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music. Astronomy, and of course, astrology. So this served as a propedeutic education. However, compared to other disciplines, the teaching and practice of mathematics suffer from a relative marginalization, as reflected in the university status. So here you can see, for example, we have the mention of quadrivium, so mathematical science, but we don't have the detail of the text, which is very different for other disciplines such as theology or philosophy in the same statutes. However, so in contrast to natural philosophy, which benefited from a series of regulations, governing its teaching following various debates between the Faculty of Arts and the Faculty of Theology, mathematics have ultimately been regulated to a lesser degree by statute. This is probably because the disciplines of the quadrivium had remained outside the disputes based on Aristotelian doctrines. The condemnations of 1270 and 1277 only relate to astral determinism and do not aim at individual texts. Instead, they address activities like astrological elections and interrogations. The relative silence of the statutes clearly does not reflect the reality of how astronomical and astrological knowledge was transmitted within the universities of Paris and Oxford. It only attests to a greater autonomy in teaching and practices. The near lack of formal exercises such as disputation or question dedicated to the science of the stars demonstrates the independence of this discipline in the academic landscape. This autonomy did not prevent the creation of educational materials and the standardization of teaching. For example, Oxford was more detailed than Paris when it prescribed the study of John of Sacrobosco's De Sphera. Nonetheless, so the Corpus Astronomicum was authored in Paris in the 1250s and witnessed in hundreds of manuscripts and utilized as a guidebook until the close of the 14th century. So it's a collection, basically, of texts of arithmetic, as you can see, and also astronomy. The content of this teaching is better understood when considering the various references to de forma. So de forma designated prescribed text. So those kind of references may be found, for example, in manuscripts, but also in catalogues, such as, for example, the catalogue of the Collège de Sorbonne mentioning this book, De Forma, which contained, in fact, John of Sacrobosco trilogy, so De Sphera, Algorithmus, and Computus. Less regulated in Paris, the teaching of the Scientia Stellarum, or Science of the Stars in Latin, was also less frequent and certainly optional. The collegiate institution facilitated this type of small group teaching during festivus diebus, so feast days. Several examples illustrate this practice. So in 1340, Suno of Suden, a student of Master Conrad de Megenburg and translator of the De Sphera, delivered a lecture on the sphere, potentially based on John of Sacrobosco sphere. In 1358, a bit later, Robert Lenormand sought permission to teach two astrological texts, namely the Pseudo-Ptolemy's Centiloquium and Ptolemy's Quadripartitum. These testimonies pertain to the teaching delivered by the Faculty of Arts, which seems to have been restricted to basic text, except probably the Centiloquium, but I won't enter into too much detail on that. Nonetheless, alongside the preparatory instructions, there was a more advanced dissemination and practice of astronomy and astrology by experienced Masters of Arts who were frequently associated with the higher faculties of theology and medicine. Although there is, of course, evidence of this form of lessons in light of their contents, it can be assumed that they pertain to an advanced teaching. In 1320, Master Geoffroy de Meaux of the University of Paris discussed astronomical tables in his treatise Flo's Calendariorum, pointing out the inadequacies of the Alphonsine tables. And in fact, those issues were explained during a lecture he gave. The same year, another master, John Vivon, published a set of tables of which the colophon reads that they were composed for the use of the students of the University of Paris and all others. There is no evidence of official university teaching in these mentions. However, it appears that this represented a higher level of instruction where bonds between masters and disciples developed, as well as communities of practitioners of the science of the stars. Within the university, the college, or collegium in Latin, constituted a rather autonomous place where statutes regulated the daily life of the community of scholars. In addition to board and lodging, and in the absence of a university library at that time, until at least the 15th century, colleges provided access to a library comprised of books donated by patrons or former fellows, quondam socii. The collegiate structure cultivated a sense of community, an esprit de corps, and many enduring intellectual connections persisted well after leaving the university. There are various clues in text and colophons that point towards the Collège de Sorbonne as a center of scientific production. In the 14th century, the scientific contents of its library were exceptional and reflected the scientific practices of some of its fellows. Other scholars were inspired to visit the college and to access this amazing library, such as Jean Desmures, for example, who annotated many scientific manuscripts housed in the Sorbonne. You have here one example of a manuscript from the College of Sorbonne annotated by Jean Desmures, who also, in fact, drew this horoscope chart of the date of Ousmane's death. As indicated by the colophons in some of Jean Desmures' work, he produced them during his tenure as a host of the college, so during the beginning of the 1320s and in 1313-19 for his canons to the Alphonsine tables, so astronomical tables. He was a simple host, so a member of the college, not a fellow. A similar context is found at Merton College in Oxford, where scholars from the same generation shared a similar interest in astronomical and astrological writings and practices. This sense of the community prompts them to offer reciprocal aid to one another. In his astrological predictions of the conjunctions of Saturn and Jupiter of 1357 and 1365, John Ashendon cites Simon Bredon's calculation of the motion of the eighth sphere that he completed in 1340. You can see here the mention of Simon Bredon in the manuscript. This calculation was likely commissioned by John himself. In that same year, Simon also resigned his position as Merton procurator in favor of a dilectus magister, an esteemed master, who was none other than John Ashendon, Mertonian noted for his astrological works. Collaborations endure beyond the stay in college, as evident in wills related to former fellows. The communal memory of this group was preserved in written works and manuscripts and also in certain bequests. Along with books bequeathed to his former college, Simon Bredon, so still the same, in his will dated to 1368, left a large astrolabe to his colleague and friend, William Reed, cited here. So he was part of the Merton circle too. So beyond the shared environment of activity and living, the defining characteristic of these communities of learning is a shared engagement with the science of the stars and with particular texts and tables. In the 14th century, there was a partial focus on assimilating a fresh array of tables and parameters. Those tables were originally compiled at the court of Alfonso X of Castile between 1263 and 1272 by two Jewish astronomers, Isaac ben Sid and Judah ben Moses Cohen. It is not known in what form they crossed the Pyrenees, but they were used for the first time in Paris. In 1319, although a marginal notation from 1304, recently discovered by David Just, provides preliminary evidence of its use either in France or in Italy. It is probable that the tables were brought to Paris without any canons. So canons are the texts which usually describe how to use the tables to compute a variety of values such as planetary positions or astronomical phenomena. Therefore, one of the initiatives of the Parisian Circle was to familiarize themselves with these materials, to create canons to accompany the tables, and to base some of their works on the Alphonsine parameters. The recognition of Alfonso X as an equal authority to Ptolemy appears to have been established in the earliest works employing those parameters. Jean Desmures praised the Alphonsine tables in two of his early works and asserted that he had experimented with them through observations. In his Expositio Intentionis Regis Alfonsi, just here, completed in 1321, Jean Desmures provides various empirical proofs to verify particular values, such as, for example, the accurate length of the tropical year or the mean motion of the sun. One of his precise observations relates to the measurement using a large quadrant, called dagger, of the meridian altitude of the sun at the moment of the vernal equinox, which occurred in Évreux in 1319, while Jean Desmures was still affiliated with the Faculty of History. And Jean Desmures, as you can see, is also the author of a treatise on this instrument, the cardagger. As early as 1321, the assembly of a canonical corpus of tables and canons seems to have been undertaken over a short period of time by several Parisian masters with close links. The development of this corpus involves the production of model writings on the basis of Albatani's siege. The Alphonsine tables establish a shared foundation for comparable techniques. The manuscript and text of these experts reveal several indications of their cooperation and even their intellectual lineage in some cases. So ideas and works seem to have circulated rapidly within this group. Although the text offers coarse insight into these connections and collaborations, the personal manuscripts of certain astronomers elucidate these interactions. In his notebook, where he records observations, mainly computations, but also drafts, copy of his treatises, Jean Desmures refers to the work of various of his contemporaries. So here I will give you 3 examples, but there are many in this manuscript. So first, on a blank leaf, Jean Desmures compiles tables detailing the precise hourly velocities of the sun and moon. In the heading, as you can see here, he notes that the lunar velocity align with John Vimon's table of lunar velocities in minutes per day, as well as that John of Saxony, so both contemporaries. On another leaf, Jean discusses a technique for calculating the time of apparent conjunction through lunar parallax in longitude. He makes a comparison between the methods used by John of Saxony, another contemporary, and John of Sicily, who was also a Parisian astronomer of the late 13th century. Now, at the end of his calculation of the solar eclipse of May 1333, a detailed computation, Jean inserted a note referring to John of Ligne, who had calculated the equation of time for the Toledo latitude. So these various references are all linked to preparatory calculations that Jean Desmures did not preserve in his own works. They testify to a period of learning and the beginnings of certain practices, certainly justified, again, by the absence of original canons accompanying the tables. Intellectual lineage contributed greatly to the dissemination of works and ideas. When some of these scholars worked together at the same level, informal teaching certainly led to the creation of master-disciple relationships. This lineage is evident in the case of John of Ligne and 2 of his own disciples, John of Saxony and John of Genoa. John of Saxony was probably one of the first to hold John of Ligne's canons in his hands. This can be deduced from his autograph copy of the canons on the primum mobile, so on the spherical astronomy, if you want, and the planetary canons. It is dated, so the copy is dated 1323, as you can see on the colophon, so 1 year after the completion of the canons by John of Ligne, who completed his canons in 1322. This manuscript also contains work by other members of the circle, such as Jean Desmures, again, but also John Vimont. These texts were all written between 1320 and 1324, when John of Saxony was still a student. This manuscript testifies to the intense activity of this group from the early 1320s and to the early dissemination of their writings among their students. John of Genoa followed in the footsteps of his master's astronomical works, which he cited in several of his writings. His dependence on the work of John of Ligne is evident in his Canones Eclipsium, so basically canons on eclipses, which he completed in 1332 when he had just obtained his medical degree. In one of the paragraphs preceding the colophon, John of Genoa justifies his choices and sources. With regard to the method of calculating the duration of the eclipse, John of Genoa advised the reader to rely, as you can see, on Al-Batani, but also John of Linear, whose canons are longer than they are difficult. So this is for the rectification of the parallax that he advised to rely on those authors. Both disciples, John of Saxony and John of Genoa, made John of Linear an authority on Parisian Alphonsine astronomy, whose canons serve as a foundation and model and were soon to be transmitted to England shortly, so in the 1330s. The dissemination of recently written treatises is an integral aspect of the publication procedure. The ultimate version of a text is circulated within a group of scholars in order to benefit from suggestions or advice, so something very modern. This group served as an optimal forum for the circulation of ideas and first drafts. Nonetheless, obtaining tangible evidence of these preliminary exchanges is extremely infrequent for the medieval period. As most often, it is the definitive version of a medieval work which survived in manuscripts to this day. A rare counterexample is a personal list of loan contained in Jean Desmur's notebook, as you can see here. The document provides an inventory of works that were lent by Jean Desmur to various persons, including a number of Parisian masters. The majority of these loans pertain to compositions by Jean Desmur, including his very own canons to the Alphonsine tables, completed in 1339 at the Sorbonne. This list provides evidence of Jean Desmur's influential network at the University of Paris, as well as in other locations such as the court of Navarre and the papal curia. So basically, when people were returning the text, Jean Desmur was basically crossing out the entry. So that's why you have all these entries crossed out. So it's an entry per individual. The rapid diffusion of contemporary works among a group of scholars or the influence played by key figures is particularly striking when considering the Merton College Circle. Simon Breeden, physician and theologian, and William Reid, Bishop of Chichester and bibliophile, seem to have been the key figures in the construction of a community motivated by the study of the science of the stars. A manuscript compiled by William Reid from 1368 to 1385 may be perceived as a portable library of the compositions of his contemporaries. These volumes present a distinctive dossier concerning planetary conjunctions and their associated astrological prognostications. It also highlights the fact that astronomy was often a vehicle for the calculation of astrological charts and elaboration of predictions. The manuscript Digby 176, preserved at the Bodleian Library and compiled by William Reid, contains one of only two works composed by William Reid, so the Almanac Solis, composed in 1337. It is not strictly speaking an almanac or an ephemerides, but rather a list of the daily true positions of the sun given for a 4-year cycle, here 1341, 1344. The Almanac Solis is derived from the Alphonsine parameters recently transmitted to England, which were later used by William Reid for his tables based on the Oxford Meridian in 1340. The same work may be found in another copy by the same scribe. So the copy is Digby 178, still a manuscript of the Bodleian Library. This manuscript belonged and was partly copied by Simon Breeden, friend of William Reid. So both copies were in fact copied by Simon Breeden himself. The Almanac Solis was therefore circulated soon after William Reid composed it. It is possible that Simon collaborated with William during this time, as Simon was concurrently working on his commentary of Book 3 of the Almagests, which focused on the movement of the sun. The link between Simon Breeden and William Reid is also evidenced by the administrative role they played in the college, so Merton College, and by the church benefices they individually obtain in Wigan, in Kent, and in Chichester. The same manuscript also presents further evidence of the collaboration between William Reid and John Ashenden. It includes William Reid's initial computations using his own set of tables for the meridian of Oxford, based on the Alphonsine parameters, to support John Ashenden's prediction of the 1345 triple conjunction. This collaboration emphasizes the expertise of both individuals, with one specializing in astronomical calculations and the other in astrological predictions, as it is also specified in the table of contents of the manuscript written by William Reid's clerk. It is written, William calculated and John Ashenden prognosticated. The English astrologers, so John Ashenden's prediction, did not depend solely on William Reid's calculations. At the end of his judgment on the conjunctions of 1357 and 1365, he explicitly mentioned his reliance on Walter Elsden's calculations for the duration and intensity of the partial lunar eclipse that occurred on the 31st July 1357 and its subsequent catastrophic consequences. It seems evident from both mentions that certain scholars possessed expertise in the realm of astronomical computations, while others were more oriented towards the field of astrology. We have here the very beginning of a sort of specialization, if you want. So to conclude, although evidence of joint reflection and collective work on a corpus of scientific texts and tables is mostly scattered, examination of personal manuscripts of medieval scholars provides insight into their working methods, scientific practices, and relationships with their contemporaries. In certain circles, there was in fact a real advanced teaching of the science of the stars, or rather a transmission of theories and practices. By assimilating the tables that had recently arrived from Spain, astronomers can be observed at work, testing parameters and drawing up canons for using these tables. However, the importance of universities, and especially colleges, in cultivating regulated communities and intellectual exchanges cannot be denied in the practice of science, of medieval science. A few years later, in Oxford, astronomy and astrology flourished in the Merton Circle, partly shaped by the use of the Alphonsine values. Overall, the study of extant manuscripts, documents, and medieval libraries provides a unique opportunity to better understand the development of medieval science. It offers unique insights into scientific practices and the circulation of ideas, and on how these were shaped by individual interests, network of practitioners, and institutions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. It's a very trivial question. What's the ferial letter B?
So it's a system that you can find basically in calendars in order to know exactly. So basically a ferial letter is designating a day. So you have more or less perpetual calendar. So you can see in computistical manuscripts. And so, of course, in order to know exactly when was the day, you had to find the golden numbers corresponding to a letter, and then you had the specific day of Easter. And so this specific day, if it's a C, for example, it will be, for example, every Wednesdays will be a C for a specific year. So it's a kind of ferial letters.
Thank you. So a question we've had online, which is, when does astrology stop being kind of respectable, being taught and studied in universities?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question because I would like to stress, because it's probably unusual when you don't know medieval science, that astrology at that time is just a practical part of astronomy. So it's an application, if you want, of astronomy. When does it stop to be taught? I would say probably in the late 17th century, because we have still, in fact, shares in astrology until the late 17th century, if I am not wrong, but maybe I have colleagues, early modernist colleagues that will be, probably will have a better answer, but I think it's late 17th century. Yeah, exactly, it's later than we think, yeah.
Absolutely.
You'll have to pardon my ignorance with this question as well, but am I right that in the time that these measurements were being taken, the prevailing view was that the Earth was flat? Oh, that wasn't correct?
No, it's,
okay.
I'm sorry, but it's incorrect. It's a common view to say that during the Middle Ages, people thought that the Earth was flat, but it was not at all the case. In fact, people knew that the Earth was a sphere since even during the antiquity, before Ptolemy, it was known that the Earth was a sphere, and you probably saw, so I'm coming back to the work De Spera by John of Sacrobosco, and that's why, in fact, okay, so here, for example, you have this diagram of the different spheres surrounding the Earth, but the Earth is also a sphere on this diagram. So no, during the Middle Ages, they knew that it was a sphere, yeah.
So final question, which I jotted down. Yeah, so is anyone at this time, obviously the things you've shown us are in Latin, but is anyone writing in English or French for people who might need astronomical calculations for navigation or something like this?
For navigation, it was probably less the case. It's the case later, probably in the late 15th century and in the 16th century, that you found, for example, John of Sacrobosco treatises embedded within manual of navigation, etc. Astronomical computation was especially done for calculating astronomical phenomena such as eclipses or comets, for example. You can find some astronomical navigation, but they were using some instruments, and so it's a bit less the case, I would say. Okay. But I'm not a professional a historian of navigation. But
so yeah, we need to move on to our next lecture, but let's thank Laure again for a fantastic talk.
Thank you very much.